Ward 3 Town Hall meeting. I try to hold these on an annual basis, and of course, we've done that in person, usually at Amherst Street School in the past, but now we are doing it virtually, and I want to thank everyone for attending. Now, we just looked through the attendance list, and I want to introduce a few of the people who are on here. I'm not sure we've seen everyone, but in terms of elected officials, we have Cindy Rosenwald, who is, of course, the state senator and a resident of Ward 3. Suzanne Vale is a state rep. I see her on the screen. Trish Klee, who's both a state rep and the Ward 3 alderwoman. And was there anyone else? That might be it. I don't know if Sherry's on here or not, Sherry Dutsey. So what I usually do is I talk about a few city issues for a little while to raise a few issues and talk about the few of the things that are going on. You'll hear from some city directors, 1 or 2, 3 directors from the city who are involved in various issues that might affect Ward 3. And then we will take your questions and your comments. Now we're going to try to go about an hour because we find that, beyond that, people get Zoom exhaustion, too much Zoom these days. We, of course, want everyone to be respectful and kind. For those who are going to speak or ask questions, we want to respect everyone, so we ask you to kind of keep it to a minute or so. And beyond that, we'll just talk about whatever comes up. Again, thank you all for attending. We can't talk about what's going on in the city without addressing the pandemic, COVID-19. We've been fighting the virus now and trying to eradicate the virus now for about a year. Our public health department has done a great job in working to keep our community safe, our families safe, our friends safe. 7 days a week, community health nurses have been working to treat and care for people who have COVID-19. Also, they've been working by holding weekly testing clinics. People can get tested. Thousands of people have been tested by public health. And recently, as the city has been allocated a small supply of doses of vaccine, the state has directed our public health department to go into neighborhoods where they believe there are a lot of high risk, vulnerable citizens, residents, and they are running periodic vaccination clinics. One was this week at St. Louis down on West Hollis Street, and I think there was another one today as well. Now the trends are better than they were a month or 6 weeks ago. I mean, over the summer, we had very few cases, relatively few. In Nashville, we might have 10 or 20 active cases. As the scientists, and we are following a fact-based approach in responding to the pandemic, fact-based, following medical experts and public health experts, scientists. They told us that in the fall, late fall, winter, November, December, January, that the numbers would escalate rapidly because that's the way these viruses tend to act. And that's exactly what we saw. We went to a peak in the last 4 to 6 weeks of about 600 active cases with 30, 40, 50 people in the hospital between the two hospitals. And we have a weekly hospital call and sometimes twice a week where we get status from our two hospitals. Those numbers, though, are down over the last few weeks. We now have about 200 and some active cases, less than 300. We are running a positivity rate. Now, positivity rate means the number of people that are tested in Nashville by everyone, hospitals, doctors' offices, pharmacies, public health. What's the percentage of the people who are tested who test positive? And that's an indication of how widespread the virus is. Now, we ran up to a peak recently of, again, in about 6 weeks ago, 4 to 6 weeks ago, of over 12%. Now that's pretty high. Recently, it has come down week by week by week. Monday, Public Health reported that the positivity rate has been less than 7%, down to about 6.8. As a result, the schools are beginning to open. They've begun the process of opening grade by grade. That's certainly good news because we all want to get our kids back to school. We all want to open our economy, but to do so, we need to follow the lead of the medical experts. And they've made this very clear that we need to continue to wear our masks. We need to continue to social distance. We need to continue to avoid large gatherings. The scientists have made it clear that if we do not take those precautionary measures, we will suffer worse consequences for our families and for our friends and for our community. We've now had 77 people die, unfortunately, in Nashua, one of whom, Andre Pelletier, worked for the city of Nashua. Very good guy, 46 years. We really mourn for all of those families. Now, I know Bobby Bagley, I believe, is on the call now, so maybe I will ask her to update you for a minute or two on what she's been up to over the last few days. Are you on, Bobby?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, and thank you for inviting me. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to just share what we've been doing over the past couple of days in Nashua with regards to our continuation with the COVID response. We still continue to do disease investigation. You know, as the mayor mentioned, we still are seeing cases. The numbers have gone down, which is good news for all of us. And we do need to continue with that vigilance because we still see that because of, continue, even though the numbers are down, we still have, substantial community spread, which means that people are exposed to the virus in places where they may not be aware that the virus is there because some folks may be asymptomatic. And so we still need for folks to wear their mask and can try to social distance. And if we really don't have to be out, especially in crowds, we're still asking people to not gather together in those ways. And so along with those measures, we've also moved into, as you are all aware of, the vaccination. We really believe vaccination is going to be a key to stopping the spread of this infection and getting us to the point where we can, again, start to come together, do some of the social things that we've missed for almost a year, because it's been almost a year that we've been in this pandemic. In fact, next month, it will be exactly a year for us. March, I believe it was March 15th. Last year was when we got our first case in Nashua. So it's been a long time. So we thank everybody for their patience. We thank everybody for the sacrifices that they've made. And we're going to ask you to just keep working with us at least for another few months, folks. We have to do this for another few months. So the things that we are really focused on right now is vaccination. So we've 1A opened up with all of our first responders and healthcare workers. Folks have gotten vaccinated either through the hospital or through that fixed site that we have at Nashua High South. Phase 1B opened up that allowed for even more folks to get vaccinated, those over 75, individuals with comorbidities or that have 2 or more health conditions, and people that take care of individuals in their home that may be at high risk for hospitalization, or worse outcomes if they were to become infected with COVID. We are also doing clinics in the community. And so we have been looking at the data where we've seen the most impacted individuals, either in the hospital with disease, or where we've seen a certain disproportionate number of deaths associated with COVID. And we're starting to now reach out into the community to vaccinate those individuals. And those clinics, we've held them, or we're holding them at our senior housing units. We're also going to National Housing Authority and setting up vaccination clinics there. And then we also are holding clinics we had one last week at St. Louis de Gonza, which was a community clinic to provide vaccination coverage for individuals that are in disproportionately affected populations. So our racial and ethnic minority population groups, individuals that have substance use disorder, homelessness, people that might have barriers with transportation to getting over to Nashua High South, or individuals that live in certain census tracts can take advantage of being vaccinated through these clinics. The state gives us about a 10% allocation for that specific population group to make sure that we have equity across all of the phases of vaccine delivery. We are looking to move very shortly into vaccinating, and I know this has been long awaited for our teachers and people that are in school and that work in childcare facilities. So that's coming down the pike. We've probably vaccinated right now. We've well over 800 that we vaccinated. And tomorrow we have another one of our clinics in the community. And we have 200 people registered for vaccination tomorrow. So we've got quite a few things that are going on. We know with vaccination, we're still doing our testing. And so if people have been exposed to COVID, contact tour cases, we are still doing testing clinics as well on Tuesdays at the site at the Armory down in South Nashua. The snow, unfortunately, has caused us to cancel like 3 of those clinics in a row. And so we've been able to get people referred to other places, but we are still moving forward with all of those things. And in addition, we've opened up some of our other services. So for a while, we couldn't do many of our clinics, but we've partnered with Lamprey. And so we've been able to do our STD clinics. In fact, there's a clinic this evening. And, because life still happens, other diseases still spread. So we're making sure that we can keep those under control as well. And one of the newest things, Mayor, we did get some money from Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts Health Foundation to do increased marketing and education to decrease vaccine hesitancy in certain population groups. So we've got quite a bit going on. We're very excited about all the volunteers that have reached out to us to work at these vaccination clinics and just how our community has come together as a whole to do the best that we can to protect the health of everyone. So those are some of the things that we've been working on. And, as spring comes along, we'll be doing our home visits with lead investigation, because we know that we're going to see quite a bit of probably increases with lead poisoned kids because they've been in their homes so long. So we've got quite a few things going on. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Bobby, and thank you to all the volunteers who have been helping out. I know one person that highly qualified volunteer is Cindy's husband, Peter Clementowitz, who's been a retired physician who has been helping you vaccinate. So we really
He's really
been
having
fantastic.
fun.
Yes,
We
he is.
tell him, remember, the sharp end goes in the arm. He's really
Yes,
having fun. He's doing it again tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, of course, there are other things going on. I gave the State of the City address over the last couple of days, and I did focus on, of course, the fact that the state, at the worst possible time during a pandemic, is hitting Nashua with $11 million of additional costs, $4.5 million roughly for increased pension costs, a reduction of almost 7.5 for school aid. That translates to a 5.5% property tax increase if we have to cover all that with local dollars. So as usual, when the times get tough, the state raises your property taxes. And I could talk much more in detail about that and many other things that they've done over the years. But Cindy and our legislative delegation is working hard to turn that around. And so we're hoping to have some success there. But, with the legislative process is uncertain. We also face rising healthcare costs in the city, although we've developed a plan to curb that rate of increase, but that increased $6 million over 2 years. We've responded to the pandemic by working to help save small business. We have a $1.2 million COVID relief fund, which we're going to increase by using some federal sources by more than $1 million again to give loans and grants to small businesses and to nonprofits. We, of course, expanded the outdoor dining, which seemed very successful, but also in terms of people enjoyed eating outside downtown in a much different atmosphere than when we closed the travel lanes. But also, and we intend to do that again. So that was a big help to small businesses. We are doing a master plan right now, which I'm going to ask Sarah Marchand and maybe Amber Logue to address briefly, which is a exercise that the city does every once in a while. We have not done one for 20 years, which we're calling Imagine Nashua, and it helps us to look forward and think about and document what we would like, what direction we'd like the city to take, and what changes or what we'd like to remain the same about the city. So that's a very important exercise, citizen-led, and I will come back to that in a moment. It is Black History Month in February, and we are running a book club on the book Warmth of Other Suns. It's a great history book about the migration of African Americans from the South into northern cities. And we wanted to get it in February, but because of scheduling issues, it's going to be, I think, on March 4th. But if you want to learn more about that, you can either the city website or at the library. Now, I believe Sarah Marchand is on the call, and Amber Logue maybe as well. Sarah is the community development director, who's the staff person most responsible for the master plan. And Amber Logue, a resident of Ward 3, is the chair of the citizen committee that we have that's helping to direct the master planning exercise. Is Sarah or Amber on the call?
Hi, Mayor. Yes, I am here.
Okay. Hi,
So Sarah, hi, thank you. Sarah Marchand here, and it is awesome that Amber, our chair, is here tonight as well. So I'd be more than happy to turn over to her as well. But if Amber actually put right in the chat the website for Imagine Nashua, it's imagine.nashuanh.gov. And if you go to that site, there is all the information about our master plan. But this is the future plan for Nashua. And it is incredibly important to hear from all of you as part of this plan. The one that we did about 20 years ago, for example, prioritized adding conservation land to Nashua. We didn't have much then. We had about 230 acres. By setting that goal as a priority through the master plan, we have since over almost 1,300 acres of conserved land in Nashua. So we don't talk about, specific action items, but we are all about getting those big goals out so we can set those long-term priorities so that all of you can live in the Nashua, all of us can live and work in the Nashua that we want to see in the future. And I'd love to turn it over to Amber for a minute there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah and Mr. Mayor. I would actually like to challenge Ward 3, because if we look on the social pinpoint on the Imagine Nashua website, we're kind of underrepresented. So if you could each go on and take a look at it, see what's on there, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's really easy, and it is also anonymous. So it does ask for your name simply so it can email you back and let you know that your comment's been accepted, but it is anonymous. So if you have any concerns around that, no need to worry. Please look around if there's a certain park, for example, that you would like to see revamped, or you'll get the idea. Also, March 2nd at 6 p.m. Put that in your calendar, March 2nd, 6 p.m. It's also in the chat. That is our topics discussion. It's coming up next week, and you can RSVP through the site as well. And if you have any specific questions about it, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Sarah, and I'll put my email and my phone number in the chat as well.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. Now, I wanted to give Trish Klee, who I know is on here, ask her if she has anything she'd like to add about any of the city issues that are going on right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I had asked Director Marchant if she was going to be at this meeting, and of course I realized she would be, especially with Imagine Nashua there. But one of the things that I wanted to mention was the Lock Street project, the revamping of Lock Street and Whitney Street to create wider sidewalks, make it safer for the residents as well as the school children going to school. I know that we got $1 million grant, which is $800,000 from the state and $200,000 from the city in matching funds. That happened actually a couple of years ago, and it takes a while for that money to trickle down. But I know that there's some movement on it, and I was kind of hoping that Director Marchant could kind of give us an update. I know that we put out an RFQ, I think it was, to get some bids on some of the information, but this is happening here at Ward 3, and that's my white shovel challenge. And I'd just like to thank those people that have participated in that, including rescuing someone who needed help with their shoveling. I call them my white shovel heroes. They're going out, they're shoveling people's walkways in front of their homes, clearing out fire hydrants. And my challenge is that those who let me know that they've done it, either with picture or just letting me know, I trust everyone. I have a gift card that I will be giving out in June for first place, second place, and third place to a local restaurant downtown. And it's a $75, $50, and $25 gift card for the top 3 contenders of that. And then one other thing I want to mention that is going on in the city that, again, Amber Loge is the chairperson of the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Committee. One of the biggest concerns that we have in Ward 3, I think, throughout the city is what I call our I should call it the brown shovel issue. Some of the dog waste that we have, and Shattuck Park has been specifically hit because of the people letting their dogs just run in there like it's a dog park. So Amber, through a lot of the work that she's done, and the city has put together this advisory group, and we're looking to put in a dog park so that people can bring their dog, a free dog park, to the citizens of Nashua. And I just want to remind people, good dog owners pick up after their dogs. And as a matter of fact, my 2 just ran down here because they want to go outside. I will leave it at that, other than to say I want to thank all of the employees in the city of Nashua who have stepped up during this COVID challenge, some working from home, some working from the office. And I think that they're amazing people. And thank you so much for making Nashua look good.
So Trish does a great job representing Ward 3, and she's asking about a grant we got to widen the sidewalks essentially on Lock Street, because for kids walking to school and just pedestrians, residents in general, those sidewalks are very narrow, too narrow to plow in the wintertime. There are a lot of obstructions. So poles, stairways, things like that. So we need to widen the sidewalk. To do that, we probably have to make Lock Street one way and then make Whitney Street one way the other way. Sarah might tell us a little bit about the status of that project. But Sarah, we also got that grant. We're waiting for the money. We did get a question on another issue affecting Ward 3 from Andrea Rebeck. I don't know if Andrea is on here. This was submitted via email about the potential development on Concord Street, 10 proposed, although I understand there's no actual proposal pending at the moment or at this time, but 10 townhouses at the site of one of the churches that would be raised. So could you take a minute just to tell us about the grant and about the status of that development, or potential development, assuming that we're going to get an actual application?
Sure, thank you very much. And so the original grant is the brainchild of Public Works and Community Development as a partnership. And the grant is exactly as the Mayor and Alderwoman Clee suggested. It is to improve the sidewalks and bike lanes where are possible between Lock Street and Whitney Street, and that little connection of Lowell Street there. It was a couple of years ago. We originally awarded the funds in 2018, but they didn't show up. Imagine that, for until just recently. We are in the contract negotiations with our number one rated response to the RFQ. We did get 9 different responses. And so we believe we'll be working with CMA Engineering. That project will kick off in the next couple months as far as a preliminary engineering and engineering design. The way the grant funding is coming down from the state, it is broken into some different chunks or categories. And so the actual money for construction is not going to be available until 2023. So we are finally moving forward with it, with engineering, but this is a long, slow process. Already it has been. And so it won't be next spring that you're going to see shovels in the ground. I guess that's the short answer. And there will be a lot of public outreach as part of the design of these sidewalks and built into the required process. So there will be public meetings that I hope we can actually conduct in person by the time we get to them. And we'll come to your neighborhood and see if we can talk about it there. So that is the Lock Street project. If anybody has specific questions, I'm happy to answer that. As for the Concord Street project, some of you may have gotten notices for originally, there was an application going to the Zoning Board of Adjustment that the church at 115 Concord Street. I might have that number wrong. I can check it out.
It is 115, I think. It is
115, yes. Okay, thank you. That property has been sold and they are looking to develop housing on that property. The application that came to the zoning board was for 10 units to have different facades, but essentially one long townhouse building, one long building of 10 different townhouses. They withdrew that application. I know that they are trying to talk to some of the neighbors in the neighborhood, and Alderman Klee has been involved in some of those discussions about, you know, what does the neighborhood want to see there? What would they prefer? What would they not? So that application was withdrawn from the zoning board. I don't think that's the end of the story. I do not have any other applications before us at that time. It is zoned for residential. It allows many different kinds of residential could potentially go there. And so I think we will be waiting to see what the next application that comes in is.
All right, well, thank you, Sarah. Now, we did get some other pre-submitted questions which we could go to, but does anybody on the call have any question that you would like to ask at this time, or any comment you'd like to make? I don't hear anyone, so we will go to Jeff Daly. I don't know if Jeff is on the call. He asked about, as you probably know, we enacted early on a mask ordinance based upon the science that wearing masks limits the spread of the virus in a very effective way, especially if you wear 2 masks now. And now, of course, we were sort of way ahead, and then the state months later issued a mandate that in these indoor locations that people in stores, malls, other restaurants, when people aren't actually eating, that people wear facial protections or masks. And Jeff Daly asks, well, he's gone into various locations like Market Basket or some other stores, and people aren't wearing masks. And he asks, he thinks that's not good, and he asks what enforcement mechanisms we have. And I know we have. We could go back to Bobby, and I believe we have someone from the police department. Certainly, public health councils, stores, businesses, when masks aren't being worn, that they should do that, and they respond to complaints. I think in a few rare instances, the police department has actually issued a summons for the violation of that ordinance. But Bobby, who's on from the PD? Could Bobby and the PD person briefly respond to Jeff Daly's question?
Sure, I can start, and then we can have our partners at Nashua PD also add on. And so what we usually do if we get these complaints is that we pass the information on to our Environmental Health Department as well as National Police Department. And there's always follow-up to provide education and to remind folks that the mask mandate is still in effect. And someone from the police department actually goes and does a visit to provide further education to that facility. And I do see that we do have a couple of our partners from National PD there that can add on to what actually happens after that. But we do make sure that Captain Allard gets that information and he passes that on, and there's a natural visit from the police department.
Yes, I'm Lieutenant Peter Urban from the National Police Department. That's exactly right. We typically get calls for service or calls to check up on local businesses. We'll go out, we'll counsel. If we get real-time calls, we'll go out, speak with potential customers. We get a lot of compliance. Usually people will put their masks on. There are instances, however, where we've had to issue summonses, but generally we get a lot of compliance. We direct people to put masks on. It really has not been a huge issue once we've become involved.
And I have to say the PD has done a very good job in helping us with this because they've used the right touch, the right balance between persuasion, counseling, and I suppose in the extreme case, something a little more severe. But they've been a big help to public health in trying to ensure compliance with the mask protocols. Now, is Eric Druhart on the call? Because he has a question about the Pan Am Railroad line and next to the Jackson Falls condos.
Yes, well, yes, I'm on the call. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there was a very recent derailment next to Margarita's and the Cindy's Diner. So Nancy's Diner, I'm sorry. And, you know, I know, well, I from time to time bring up that concern, the concern that it's maybe an accident to happen and that could hit some of the buildings along the tracks. And the tracks have been, some tracks have been repaired, but where the derailment happened, you can see it's underwater. It's really very bad. It should be put higher than it is. I'm just concerned that, you know, it carries freight and tank cars, and it's waiting for a much worse accident to happen, in my opinion. This
is a serious concern. The line is owned by Pan Am, and Eric knows some of this already because we've been trying to deal with them. But the line is owned by Pan Am, which is a small railroad company, not terribly responsive over the years. We met, and the city has no, because they're federally regulated, you know, rail lines, rail service. The city has no authority really over them. But we were on a call recently. I forget, Eric, exactly what the forum was, but you had expressed a concern.
Yes, it was another resident, actually the president of the Jackson Falls Condo Association.
Yeah, I was meeting with the Condo Association, right.
Right.
Now,
because there were some ties, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to give the background, they changed some ties to improve part of the tracks, but they left them next to the buildings. And we thought, and really I appreciate the action of the city and the mayor's office, because some of these ties were removed by Pan Am.
We contacted them, and you know, they did something. Now, not enough, because as you pointed out in your written question here, they left a lot of debris there. So we will get back to them. Now, and these derailments are a big problem. The track is in terrible shape. Sometimes the track, you know, the derailments, and they happen periodically. It blocks the street. It's behind your building. Definitely, the track needs to be improved. Now, there's the prospect that Pan Am is going, so we will definitely contact them again about the debris. We've talked to them thousands of times about this, the track, and nothing happens there. But there is the prospect that a larger railroad freight company, a national company, is going to acquire Pan Am. I mean, they are seeking approval of an acquisition. And there's no guarantee. I mean, they're being very cautious about, they can't guarantee that the purchase will be approved. I think it needs to be approved by the TSA or the STA, the Surface Transportation Authority, something like that. But we have talked with them and have alerted them to the kind of lack of response in many cases by Pan Am. They seem and specifically talking about this area across Main Street behind the Jackson Falls condos. And I believe if that acquisition occurs, we will be dealing with a much more responsive organization that will be interested in, trying to maintain and improve facilities that they own. But I don't know, that acquisition is going to take a while. There's a a procedure that they have to go through to get this thing approved. But so that's more in the midterm, the next year or two, maybe, is the timing on that. But we will contact them again about the debris and see if we can get them to move that, clean that up in the short term.
Thank
It's
you.
a great place to live, and we want to get that area cleaned up so that people can enjoy it, and so that you feel comfortable there.
Sure. Thank you.
Now, is Paul Metzger on the call?
Yes.
You
Yep,
Paul,
I'm here.
you submitted a written question, but if you're on the call, we could, you could just ask it yourself. Might be a little
Sure.
more interesting that way.
Sure. So I think everyone's done a great job with, expanding the dining, closing off the streets. It brought a lot of vibrancy and life to downtown Nashua. That's great. I'm just wondering, is it possible to have bar areas out in the street, or set up an area that could be like a beer tent, just to make it a little more open other than just for dining?
Well, thank you for your comments. And of course, we wanted to act quickly to expand the outdoor dining. There were, I suppose, some risk involved that no one knew what it would do traffic-wise. But as you pointed out, it took a lot of work. The Board of Aldermen was very involved in passing various authorizations, and we got the barriers, and we got it done by early May. And I agree with you on it totally improved the atmosphere. I mean, I really miss it now. I drive downtown. Now we've removed the barriers because unless we, actually expand the sidewalks and do a lot of, a big project there, Public Works cannot plow the Main Street with those barriers there. So we plan to put the barriers back on March 15th. I miss them. The atmosphere was great, as you said. People flocked downtown, in numbers that never had occurred before, and it just changed the whole vibe of the place. You've made an interesting suggestion with the beer tent. Now there are some regulation. That stuff is very closely regulated by the Liquor Commission, and the various restaurants, I think, were able to serve beer in their areas, but it would be interesting to have a beer tent. We need to investigate whether that would be authorized by the Liquor Commission. But we have, tried to talk to some people about establishing some kind of beer garden. Like we suggested, but we can't get the right vendor. But like somewhere in City Hall Plaza or closer to Pearl out here, along the side of City Hall, somewhere around the downtown, a beer garden, but a beer tent would be the same kind of thing. So we just want to make it a place that people really want to go, and the suggestion of a beer tent, I think, would add to it if we can get that done. So Tim Cummings, the Economic Development Director, very, very involved in all this, working with all the small businesses, the restaurants. Is Tim on here? I think he might be.
Hi, Mayor, I'm here.
Do you heard Paul's question about I know you were doing something else and just got on, but Paul's question about the possibility of a beer tent and in conjunction with the expanded outdoor dining?
So I missed the question, but if I understand it from what you just relayed, we are looking at trying to do some selective areas for pop-ups. I don't know if food or
Paul, why don't you restate your question so Tim can hear it directly?
Sure. So I was saying the expanded outdoor dining has been great. And my German heritage would love to see a Nashua beer garden stood up at some point as well.
Understood. So as the mayor said, this is not necessarily a new topic. It is something we've explored in an effort to try to bring some additional energy to the downtown. There's some fundamental issues that we would have to kind of work through. And if we were to do it, we need to make sure it's done by the private sector. And therefore, there needs to be an economic return. And I'm not exactly sure that there's enough demand yet to justify it. There's some fundamental costs, startup costs that we would have to get over, providing bathrooms, providing water, some sanitary building and health code type of regulations that we just need to make sure we have. So you couldn't just in theory pop up a tent without working through some of these startup costs. And then you got to make sure that you're getting enough revenue in to justify it. And so if we could come up with a strategic partnership to get kind of creative, I think you'd find a willing city, the city being willing to work with folks in an innovative fashion. But we would need to kind of work through some of these issues to be able to get to what maybe you're talking about. But we have explored the idea of maybe doing something along the lines of what you're talking about.
What about like a temporary thing? I mean, like, for example, we do when pre-COVID, of course, at Holman, we did the Fall Beer Festival, and there's sort of a temporary setup without, of course, Holman has bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. But,
right.
I mean, what if we did it in conjunction? Well, City Hall has outdoor bathrooms, actually. I mean, is there anything we could do temporarily that would be kind of set up and take it down, set it up, not, take it, it's up for a day or two and comes down or whatever? Do you think that could work?
Yes, we would need to find an operator, but using City Hall Plaza as an option because of the quote unquote bathrooms and the running water, that it might be more plausible because of just that infrastructure that would be there, so you could operate it in a sanitary type way. So
but we will definitely look into this again. I mean, I think maybe we be interesting to talk to the people who run the beer festival at Holman and just see, how they worked it.
So also for reference, there's a few of these in Boston. So there's one in the Rose Garden Parkway. There's one along the Esplanade. So there's a few of these kind of public beer gardens on city property. Like I said, just for reference in Boston.
Yep. The Greenway has them.
Right.
Yep. And so, yes, we have kind of, not to talk out of turn, but we have looked at maybe up by the library in between 14 Court Street and the library. There's an area there where it may be plausible. There's also, we looked at down by Parc de la Renaissance over by the river to kind of possibly do what you're talking about. But we need to kind of work through some of these logistical issues to potentially do it.
Well, thank you for that suggestion. While we're on downtown, I didn't mention the fact that we have a riverfront master plan. Both Tim and Sarah are very involved there. The Board of Aldermen passed a riverfront master plan a few years ago, and then we passed a tax increment financing district to capture some of the value around the river. And we are beginning to implement it. And if you want to see it, it's online, and it's quite spectacular, really. The first step will be to light the Cotton Transfer Bridge. That should be coming in the next few months, as well as the Riverwalk. And then, and in design, and I think Tim's working with the designer on this, there are suspended walkways proposed for the other three corners, like peddlers, but the other three corners of the Main Street Bridge. There's some boat docking out kind of in front of that Greeley house, the white house with the big lawn. And we've also got a really nice expansion of the Renaissance Park. So there's a lot that could be done there, and we're hoping to take greater advantage of the river because, you know, it's an asset that the city has that really has been underutilized over the decades. And there is somebody has bought the former Riverside Barbecue building and is going to open a barbecue restaurant there, and they kind of have a riverfront deck that could be improved, certainly. Tim, you had an idea there?
I did. I just wanted to say Paul Shea in the chat right now put out what the plan is. So I just want folks to look at it. Thanks, Paul. But also just want to make sure folks know what tax increment financing is. I want to be just clear on this. This would not be quote unquote new taxes for the city. What we're doing is accommodating this type of project within the current taxes that is there by segregating a particular property and dedicating that tax revenue from that, which would otherwise be collected, and putting it into this project. This project right now is still in the design phase. We hopefully will be wrapping up design by the end of this, I would say probably by the end of summer. And then we'll start permitting, and we'll try to get under construction for sometime this year, but most likely would be early next year, depending on how the rest of the design goes. But it's a really exciting project that will help revitalize and add some tremendous value to the downtown.
Now, does Eric, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, well, it's me.
It's my wife.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Now, what is your first name? What is your first name?
Antoinette.
Antoinette, yes.
Yes. So
Antoinette used to be a downtown business owner.
that's so I also, am looking at the river here at Jackson Falls. And last year, all the trees along the path on the library side came down. And then during the summer, weeding went on. So I don't remember who it was, if it was Greenscape or some of your workers who came and weeded at the beginning of the summer, and then they had to come back again, probably in August, and do it again. So my question is, since those trees have come down, of course, it's very ugly on the other side. It looked better when the trees were up, and I understand they have to come down for the Riverwalk renovation. But wouldn't it have been better, if it won't be done for a couple of years, to have left the trees instead of these trunks, cut off trunks that we see, and the guys having to do the weeding?
If I could, Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank you. So again, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. This is a multi-year type project. And what we needed to do was start the invasive species removal, which was not a one-year process. And in fact, something we're still doing now, and we're going to need to continue to do. And so the tree removal, the invasive species, the grinding of the stumps, and then ultimately a landscaping plan is all being executed right now. And what you saw last year was the start of the operational upkeep of the riverfront. And this next spring, so this spring right now, I should say, you're going to see maintenance and continuing upkeep of the riverfront all in that area. You're going to see, the stumps getting grinded down this spring. You're going to see some landscaping, some mulch. You'll see some improvements in that regard, which is this, again, this is a multi-phased, multi-year initiative where we're trying to open up the riverfront and start to think about the river in a different way. If folks recall, Nashua, and not just Nashua, but a lot of mill cities looked at their river for industrial type purposes, and it is a great asset for your, from a mill and an industrial standpoint. Now, as we've come to look at cities in a different way, folks that have a river in their downtown really need to think about their river as a natural asset and look to beautify it as a natural asset as you build a mixed use environment where folks want to live and work, ultimately recreate. And so it's going to take a while because that's decades of thinking of the river in a certain way, and we're starting to just change the culture now.
Now,
Thank you, Tim.
As Antoinette has pointed out, the north side of the river, that would be east of the south side of the river, east of the Main Street Bridge is, pretty rough, at least at the beginning here. But on the west side of the Main Street Bridge, we had on both, especially on the north side, just this weed growth that was horrible. I mean, it blocked, you couldn't even see the river, you'd walk along and all you'd have is, 4, 5, 6 foot high weeds. So that removal has been, a very significant improvement because now you can actually see the river west of the Main Street Bridge. But getting those weeds out is easier said than done. Because it's along the river, there's a lot of environmental regulation. You need to get the plan approved. You need to use the right compounds to remove the weeds, and you have to cut them. It's a lot to it. And Sarah's been involved in some of that as well. It's him, but we just want to open up the river, and despite the way it looks in some sections now, to ultimately beautify the whole stretch between the, down beyond the Cotton Mill and the Clock Tower Place, all the way through Jackson Falls, where you are, all the way up towards Sanders, or Sanders, as I call it, Sanders, BAE, and have river walks on both sides of the river.
Yeah, that would be nice. It's just that those weeds keep coming back. I understand.
Yes. Now, Gene Porter, who is I see or understand that Gene has his hand up. Gene is like Nashua's #1 river advocate. So he's involved not only with the Nashua River, but also with the Merrimack River, which also could be a much more spectacular asset for the city. But Gene, are you on?
I'm on.
Yes, you have your hand up, I think.
I did.
Okay, you want to go ahead?
Okay. I think the city's doing a terrific job along the Nashua River. And my compliments to you and the staff that's got a very attractive plan in place and is working to actually implement it. You mentioned docks along the far side of the river in front of the Greeley House and what have you, and that's great. But there's another place where you need docks, and that's up at the Mill Yard launch ramp that the city has done a nice job of getting public access to the launch ramp in the Mill Yard, but there's no dock there. And while the young people in their kayaks may not need it, those older guys who aren't quite as supple as some of the young kayakers, it's a safety issue. If you could put a dock in up there by the Mill Yard, the same kind of floating dock you've got up at the Stello Stadium launch ramp, that makes it much safer and more attractive for people to use boats on the Nashua River, which is a thing to be desired. The same comment would apply over at the Greeley Park ramp on Merrimack River.
Now, I believe we've got the dock coming. We've got some more improvements coming on at Greeley Park. But so what Gene is talking about is behind the Mill Yard Technology Park, as it's called now. The owner there gave us, the city and the public, the right to launch boats and park vehicles on his property. And there's a place, boat ramp where you can launch boats. And Gene is saying if we had a dock there, that would make it much better to use it. And so I'm going to ask Tim to kind of look into that, because that's something that's a riverfront improvement that could be done in the context of the whole riverfront master plan.
Right.
So I think that would be a fairly inexpensive improvement that would mean, make things, as you suggest, better for anyone who wants to get into the
Right.
water.
Thank you.
Now, we did get a question, what about City Hall? The question is, why is it not open? Well, City Hall is open by appointment. Now, of course, the reason we have restricted access is because of the pandemic. I mean, we're trying to do everything we can to protect the public and the employees. We've had a couple of outbreaks in City Hall of COVID-19 pandemic outbreaks. Fairly serious, some people got pretty sick. No one died or passed away, but some people got sick, so did their wives and husbands. So we're trying to protect people from that. And so the way we're working it is that for vehicle registration, which is, and there's also work going on in City Hall, we're using federal CARES Act money to make changes in the automobile registration area, in the assessing area, and in the city clerk's area, so that the interactions can take place in a more pandemic protective manner. So we're going to have kind of stations, almost like a medical office with a sneeze guard and everything, so that people can meet and be safer than they would have been under the old configuration. Now, we're going to get by this pandemic, but we're thinking there could be another one. So, we want to so these changes, I think, are long-term very beneficial, but that work is going on right now. So what we did is we upstairs on the 3rd floor put in temporary automobile registration stations, and we let 10 people in at a time by appointment. 5 people are getting their cars registered and 5 people are waiting. And then when someone finishes, another person comes in with their appointment. And we have found that this works quite well. I mean, it means that the wait is more, is actually less during many times, because there's not the huge rush like when we just had it come as like a kind of a free for all. Some days, some hours you'd have a long wait, a lot of people waiting because everybody would come at the same time, and other times no one is there. We now avoid those long waits because you can rely on when your appointment is, when your scheduled time comes, you're going to get registered quickly thereafter. But also you can reach, we're performing, Sarah's doing building permits, and everything is being done remotely. All these services are being done either remotely or by appointment in City Hall. So we are, and when this has come up with, at least a few people, I've said, well, what service did you seek that you couldn't get? And rarely does anyone have anything that they haven't been able to get. And if there is something, like we've had a couple birth certificates and things that were needed on an emergency basis, we'll call us and we'll take care of it. So we are open just by appointment, and the reason for these restrictions is to try to protect everyone. We don't want to get outbreaks and pass things on to the public, and we just we need to continue to be careful until vaccination and everything makes the pandemic no longer really a factor in everyday life. Now, we have done an hour. I don't know if anybody has any other questions. As I said at the beginning, usually we find that an hour is about what people can take. We want you to come back next time. On the screen, I believe, I don't know who's put that up, but that's Gene driving one of his historic boats. He's got some great wooden boats that have a great, unbelievable, they're very beautiful and an incredible character to them. And I believe that one is on the Merrimack River, it looks like. But he launches these in the Merrimack and the Nashua River. So Gene is a real river river advocate. So does anybody else have any other questions or comments before we adjourn? I don't see anyone. Well, thank you everyone for, we are going to look into that dock. We're going to try to continue to pursue the idea of a beer garden. Thank you, Paul. We're going to follow up on your questions, and we appreciate your interest in the city. Please think about the master plan, getting involved in Imagine Nashua. Thank you, Amber, for getting on. Sarah, Tim, Nashua PD. We will of course hold another Ward 3 meeting probably early next year. Otherwise, I do occasional coffees and other ways to try to reach out remotely. Anyway, I hope you all have a good evening.